Calling to order the June meeting of the Park Township Planning Commission. We have everybody here, so thank you for being able to make it. I know a couple of folks were traveling and running and got back early, so we could have everybody here, so thank you. Approval of the agenda is the first thing on our agenda. Do we have any suggested changes to the agenda as it exists? Support. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Second item is the approval of minutes from our May meeting. Do we have any changes that we'd like to make?
A lot of minutes for a short meeting.
There are a lot of minutes. We had a lot of conversation.
No changes for me.
Okay. All right. I went through and didn't find any either.
Motion to approve as written.
Support.
All in favor? All right. Moving right along. Public comment. I'll open the public comment at this point. Nothing from you? Okay, I think we'll close the public comment just as quickly. We have a new commissioner with us tonight, Dan Bourbon. And Dan, first of all, welcome. And maybe you could take a couple of minutes and tell folks a little bit about yourself and your background and why we're so excited to have you.
Well, I technically summarized my life on a 2x5 fire. 37 years in Park Township now. First 8 on Elderwood, near Lake Shore in Riley, and the last 29 on Lake Shore Drive. So I arrived in '88 and have never left. My career was 39 years in the auto industry. First 21 in General Motors, and 11 years with Char at Prince and JCI, and the last 7 at EST Testing Solutions. I retired in 2006, and if you do the math, I'm just about to the point where that's the longest time I've ever done anything in my life is be retired. My education undergrad was industrial engineering. I have a master's in forestry, and I took the opportunity of COVID to get a certification in the Michigan Master Naturalist through both classwork and fieldwork through MSU Extension. So I'm a tree hugger. One thing you probably wouldn't know about me is that I'm a communitarian by passion. I'm drawn to this concept of a connected community for Park Township, whatever that really means. I have an idea, but anyhow, we'll get past that. But if you look at what other things I get involved in, you start to see this communitarian thing be my hobby and pastime. I've been 4 years at Community Action House as a pretty heavy volunteer, both in logistics, food rescue, and seasonally voluntary income tax assistance. It's my motto, not their motto, but I like to describe Community Action House as from destitute to a donor, and trying to help people all along that track. Great work. I've been affiliated with Lakeshore Advantage for 23 years now. First as a founder, then as first president, then 11 years on the board. And the remainder of that time, I'm a mentor to the staff, to entrepreneurs, and to second stage companies. So I have a good foundation in economic development, and I obviously believe that's a key part of prosperous community. Now I'm on the planning commission, and I can be a voice for the future of Park Township, and I'm excited about that. I'm in my 49th year with one wife, Julie. We have 2 daughters, one 45 and 41, 5 grandchildren, 4 in Ada, 1 in Austin, Texas. One just graduated from high school, and to her, so someday you can go into your grandchildren's graduation. So my daughter has an 18-year-old, 17-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 15-year-old all in one house. And I have a third grader in Texas. Last thing is to say that I'm probably gonna be pretty quiet for a couple meetings, just to get the lay of the land, but I am a man of a certain age, and if we get old, our internal editors start to get tired and forgetful. If I blurt out something and it's silly or wrong or ill-advised, just tell me. I've been told before.
You'll be like the rest of us when we shoot.
In good company. So, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. We're happy you're here.
And thank you for, in your spare time, deciding to join the planning commission. So there's obviously an awful lot of things that you've got going on in your life, and we appreciate your willingness to serve.
This woman gave me so much stuff I needed.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dan, and welcome. I just want to make a comment. I really appreciate your willingness to serve, as we had some terrific candidates for this open position. And we said the same thing to each. I think it made the decision very difficult, but I think for a lot of reasons, and some of which you've mentioned, you have a lot of very interesting perspectives on, I think, things that are really important in the township. And I think that'll be really valuable to us as a commission. So thank you. So I think that takes us to election of officers. I can talk about the composition of the planning commission and the process that we go through here. Work. Okay. This is our regular June meeting, and each year the first meeting that we have during that time frame, being our June meeting, we need to elect officers, and the officers will be in place for 1 year. These are not coterminous with your 3-year terms or however long you continue to serve. But these are necessary for us, and we have 3 positions that we need to fill. One of which chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. It is the positions are nominated, voted on, and I have a hunch there won't be a lot of argument on the individuals that are nominated as officers, but we do need to certainly go through that process. So I will open the floor to nominations for those positions. Yes.
Nominate Tom Louise as chairman. Or
Support.
president, or whatever the title is.
The board.
Cheers.
Chair.
Any other folks interested?
Yeah, you can have it.
Okay. Since we have a nomination in a second, all in favor?
Aye.
I think that's unanimous. Thank you. I'm very happy to serve. Next will be vice chairperson.
I'd like to nominate Dave Campbell as vice chair.
Second. Dave, are you willing? You are willing?
Not campaigning for it, but willing.
So just to speak to the vice chairperson role, essentially, it says in the event of an absence or disability of chairperson, essentially, I don't miss too many meetings. I plan my life and my activities around not.
The attendance here.
Yeah, no, I think I missed one, and that was the flu. So essentially, unless I get run over by a bus, it's a pretty easy role. Anybody else who's interested or would like to be, or anybody that would like to put them into nomination?
I'd like to nominate Stephanie John.
Stephanie, would you be willing to serve?
I would be willing, but if Dave is more interested.
I'm willing, I'm not campaigning.
For what it's worth, I'd be happy to continue my role from last year.
Okay, I'm good with that as well. Do we want to, do you want to? I guess what we would do in this case, you can either turn down the, yeah. You've been nominated.
I guess.
So I think you just said you'd prefer to stay in the secretary role if you can, okay?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, let's vote on the vice chairperson role. Do we have, first of all, do we have a motion in a second? If we did, I missed it. Okay, we do. Dave Coppinall has been nominated for that position with a vote and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. For secretary, do we have a nomination?
Nominate Stephanie Trella.
Support.
You're willing to serve?
I am.
Okay, with that, all in favor of Stephanie, the secretary?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Okay, so from here, back to the agenda. I guess in terms of bylaws and policies, Mika, do you want to kind of make some comments around this and set up the next points? Thank you.
So these are our bylaws, which we uncovered just a couple of years ago. They had been buried for a long, long time. And so we've made a couple of updates over time as we've run across stuff. So this year, when I was reviewing these to get them ready, I noticed that the Planning Enabling Act, or the state legislation that was mentioned in the bylaws, was the one that had been superseded somewhere around 2008, something like that. So the old one was still in here. That's kind of the main correction that I'd like to have us make. They also, I didn't like how they use capitals, and that's where most of the red comes from. That was just easier to find and replace when it came to actually capitalizing things like Planning Commission and Board of Trustees. And then the only other thing, and this is one that would be a little bit different for the last few years at least, the Planning Commission annual report has gone June to May, and then we look at it at this meeting here. Our bylaws have it going from, I think, April 1 to March 30, and then looking at it, and it would be in the last month's meeting, so the May meeting. I kind of like how we've been doing this with the annual report, kind of all the governance stuff all together in June. So that's just a suggestion. You can leave it as it is, but I would suggest maybe changing the bylaws so that that's something that you review at this meeting at the same time as all the other governance stuff.
So we'd be changing the bylaws so that the annual report is consistent.
Correct.
Okay.
That timing noted in here?
It is.
Where?
I can
was-
lose it.
Near the end, I thought.
Actually, I did change that in here. It's on the last page, on page 6. Under annual report, article 9.
Section.
I changed it on the memo, but not in the bylaws with the markup version.
Those seem like reasonable changes.
I agree.
Okay.
So what was the time period for, it would be,
June 1 through May 31. So it would have been, for example, the beginning of this month, June 1 of this month to May 31 of next year.
okay,
Do we need a motion to change this?
I think it would be wise. I don't know for sure, but I think that would be wise.
Okay, can we have a motion?
30 days in June.
Yeah, let's restate just so everybody's. So we would be changing the dates for the Planning Commission annual report in the bylaws so that they coincided. Essentially, they would cover June 1st through May 31st. Right. We have a motion.
Motion to change
Okay,
from June 1 to May 31st.
all right, second.
I'll second.
oh, I thought you were.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can I do that, by the way? I can, okay. I'm following tradition. I'm usually, okay, all in favor? All opposed? Thanks, Mika. Good suggestion on those.
And then, so you voted on the change in dates, also correcting the authorizing legislation and
And the
proper nouns.
Yes.
Really is.
That was part of the motion.
That was part of the motion.
Yes, it was.
Sorry, we didn't hear it.
You support that part of the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Rule of policy.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on the
Yes.
bylaws. So here I go, even
Okay.
if it's off. In section 4, a conflict of interest, that language,
Mhm.
right in the middle of the paragraph, it says if there's a conflict of interest, we declare it, and then we go sit in the audience. And in all the state documentation you gave me, it encouraged that it be leave the room, not sit in the audience.
Yes.
Sensitive to this because I just had a friend go through a year full of hell on an ethics claim. And the thing that saved him, he recused himself. He did everything right. He left the room, and the minutes and the videos are what the court ruled in his favor for. So I'm curious as to why it says sit in the audience, and then is that what we really should do?
I noticed that as well, because I was going through the same planning documents and the decision-making tools that they have in the state guidelines. And we had a conversation about that in another meeting as well. I think it's advisable. And I think that's a change. I just put that out that might be a change we want to make in the bylaw as well.
Yeah, I would be open to that. My guess as far as why it's like that is that maybe ethics best practices have evolved over
Mhm.
time. This was last reviewed, when we pulled it out a couple years ago, so it had last been updated in 2009, I think it was, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me if some of that has evolved, and you're right, that's what it says on most of the documentation for recommendations, so if that's something a change the planning commission would like to make, I don't think that would be a bad thing.
I think the sense is that the pressure of having somebody that may feel that conflict that's still in the audience may change the conversation, may change the discussion.
Dan, it sounds like you're about to make your first motion.
Wow.
But I think you have support. So.
So I'd like to move that we read out the sentence sit in the audience and change it to remove yourself from the room.
What section was that under again, Dan?
This was section 4,
I
item I, second paragraph under I.
I'll support.
We have a motion on the second. Any discussion?
The only thing I would add to that, I mean, I support that, but I was in that situation just this past year.
Yeah.
And it was very helpful for me to sit in the audience because I learned some other perspectives around the issue and some things, and it really helped me to understand those perspectives. So being in that situation, and I don't think anybody felt, no, I can't say that because he's in the audience. So if anything, I was more empathetic to their cause by hearing some of the comments. So
Would it hurt to look at the video afterward?
maybe the video might help. Yeah. Just my experience.
Okay.
I think we accommodated members that have had to recluse themselves because they usually join the dais as soon as the issue's been resolved and we move on.
Right.
But I'm concerned about this court action, because we are filming and recording the session. So if this would put any member or the commission at risk legally, then I think the motion is very appropriate.
That's it. And I think to Shar's point, we do have the video recordings that are available after. So, in the interest of understanding, what did take place, we do have that tool available.
And the only other thing I would add is just because of my circumstance, literally that person, while I was in there, they said, oh, well, we will do this to make this right. And they said, oh, we'll just come over and talk to you about it. And it's Benjamin's hope. They have done an amazing job communicating and really working towards that. So we actually reached, I was sitting out there, she said, we'll come over and we'll talk about that. Yeah, that sounds great. So it just, that was my experience. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do this for legal purposes, but I'm just trying to show you the other side of the coin.
Yeah. No, I think that, yeah, go ahead.
If I recall, you also made a comment as a resident of Park Township.
I did.
You took part of the public comment, so by removing him from the room, I mean, he's no longer acting as a commissioner, but he still is a resident and he has the right to make the public comment. I think you almost have to take it on a case by case.
Yeah.
You know, and it has to be somewhat of an informal agreement between the individual and the commission.
So, you know, and I think I reached out to you ahead of time and you checked with Dan Martin around what I should be doing. And so, and maybe when you say case by case, is it going to be contentious? Is it going to be, you know, what good is it? And so maybe it is case by case. I'm not really sure. But if we want to do the full legal protection thing, then, you know, the second we.
Well, and it's not like it come up as a surprise. I mean, it was in
Right.
advance, everybody knew what was going on. So maybe we make it an either or. Depending on the, and that doesn't really define it very good, it makes a little bit of ambiguous, but. I mean, I would hate to deny you the privilege to be a resident on that end of the discussion.
Yeah, that was nice.
I have not read any legal brief. So
I think it's a, you know, this is good, this is better when it comes to that legal perspective. So, you know, sitting in the audience, good. Being removed from the room, better. You know, it's a matter more of probably risk management when it comes to best practices.
Well, I think if we, just a thought, if we make it a requirement to leave the room, essentially, we could either we could leave it as is, I guess, one option. Option A is sit in the audience, refrain from participation, and not be able to rejoin until after that discussion is over. The other option would be to leave the room. I think if we leave it as is and it's a contentious situation, we could. I don't know if we can make a decision beyond what's in the bylaw, though. That's the question. If it was contentious, can we say, well, under the circumstances, it would be advisable to have the individual leave the room?
I think we could say it would be advisable, but I'd be surprised if we could say you have to do that.
Yeah.
If bylaws allow it for them to be.
And note that my friend leaving the room did not stop the ethics violation from getting filed and going through a year of court. So he did all the right things and he still had to go through all of that.
And it was the recording. It was the
record. It was the minutes
and
the video that showed him leaving the room.
So do we want to modify the verbiage then, or leave it as leave the room instead of advisable to leave?
I guess I would take the stronger position on it if we were going to do it. If I think we all have, we could all provide input. I think we've had some good discussion on it. To me, it seems like the stronger position would be to leave the room under those circumstances. That's me.
So the thing that I think about, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
To do that. And the thing that I think about, Shar, is if somebody listens to the video and then they want to make a statement around the video, can that come back to you in terms of notes and it shows back up, you know, in the next, you know what I mean?
Well, the following sentence says that you also have to refrain, from participation in the discussion during the consideration of the agenda item. So that doesn't really, to me, sound like there's dialogue to be had.
Right.
If you recused yourself, you're totally removing yourself.
I guess the thing that I'm kind of thinking about is everybody has the right for their voice to be heard. And so to me, by removing them, so there should be a way that they can go listen to the video and they can share their thoughts, and maybe it just comes back to you. But
There's
it's been,
always public comment. So probably during public comment would be the opportunity to state whatever it is that needs to be stated, and then when it comes to the topic on the agenda is when you recuse yourself. But I don't know, sitting at the dice here, how do you make public comment?
Yeah, you really have to be off the table when it starts.
Yeah, Lynn had that, he went and sat in the audience. And
Right.
and then he took his turn and made
It was
a
public.
comment and just sat there and was not a voting member of the commission for that topic.
right.
So was it public comment or was it public hearing?
Public comment.
Okay.
It may have been a public hearing. It was a rehearing of a PUD. It was a PUD
Oh, it
amendment,
was
so I
on-
think it may have been. a public
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
That might have been during the hearing, actually.
I just
Yeah.
appreciated the process of how that happens, so. As a resident, I think regardless, everybody has the right to be heard, right? So, but I will support the other, so I just wanted to.
I appreciate that.
I like to be, have a full conversation on it.
No, I think it's important. We had, that's what we're here to do. So I think, do we have a motion at this point?
There is a motion and a second on the floor.
There is a motion and a second on the floor to require the individual to leave the room.
Yes, to change the verbiage to say remove themselves from the room.
Okay, any further discussion? If not, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor? Opposed? All right. We'll make those changes, that change the bylaw. Good discussion, thank you. Great perspective, that's what makes these things so interesting. Anything else in the bylaws that we want to touch on before we move on to our next topic, which is open meetings? All right,
Now we're getting into the exciting stuff.
I'll take that. I'll take that.
All right.
Documents for review, correct?
Yes, this
Yes.
is nothing that we have to approve. This is just an annual reminder of some of these things that policies that can affect us and that come up periodically, just so that we're all fresh on them. And we're not addressing things as they come up, just being proactive about it. So, Open Meetings Act, the spirit of the Open Meetings Act is that all of the work of the people needs to appear in the people's eye. It needs to all be publicly available so that anyone can see what that is. And so what that means is really that any deliberation or conversation on any of the policymaking items needs to be done here in a public forum that's been advertised and noticed that people can be here. So a couple things that can mean, you'll often see, if I remember to put the right footer in my email, I'll say, do not reply all to this email. That's part of that as well. So that can be through email or through conversations. So with the Open Meetings Act, no emailing among each other to discuss things that are coming up. It also means, if you have a few people together and you're discussing some of the agenda items, that's a no-no. Now it's primarily, there's kind of a thick line, like this is where it breaks the law. And then there's the gray area, which isn't really gray area. It's more, we want to make sure that we're following both the spirit and the letter of the law. So, if you have a quorum together discussing the work of the Planning Commission or any of the agenda items, then that is a clear violation of the Open Meetings Act. We ask that you not discuss it just in general outside of this body. So you can always come to staff. So you can come to me, you can come to Lorna. If we need to talk to the attorney, we can do that. You can ask me anything you want outside of meetings. And you can do that to an extent as well with the chair, like you can have some conversations in that way. But as far as conversations amongst yourselves, that all needs to happen here. So that is the Open Meetings Act. Do you have any questions on that?
Question, I can understand staff having a neutral role and not have conflict. What about talking to a trustee outside? Do we have to be cautious there?
That would be, I don't think so, but I can check with Dan Martin on that. As far as if there's any issue with that.
Well, I think the key is when you said if there's a quorum.
Right, and you've got, those are two
I
separate.
mean, like Dennis and I could go have a beer and talk about a PUD or whatever, right?
You should not,
Okay,
but you don't have a quorum,
no beer.
so.
Let's talk.
You're talking about how you like Dennis's shirt. So that's what I refer to, the kind of the best practices gray area. If you don't have a quorum, you're not necessarily in violation of the Open Meetings Act of the law, but we want to make sure that we're not coming close to that we're not tiptoeing near
Okay,
that.
so we're really not in violation, we just shouldn't do that.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Question arose in my mind as I read this in the ex parte, is that how you say it?
Yes.
Around site visits.
Yes.
Um. This would say site visits, you have to go by yourself. And is that correct?
I usually do.
Or with staff.
Yeah.
Or with staff,
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just confirming, I've had my husband go with me because sometimes, especially in the winter hours, I'm not comfortable going to sites completely by myself. Since he's not involved, that's
okay.
okay. I bring a bodyguard because,
I get it. Yeah, so I think ex parte was next, so we can go right into that, and it's referred to so ex parte communication means that you're doing something that's away from the general body. So this can come up organically, and so this is you want to avoid conversations that are outside of this body. This might be where that trustee conversation came in, although that gets a little sticky when you got an elected official and having that conversation. But if you're just talking if say a developer comes up to you at family fair and starts talking to you about the project, that shouldn't happen. But if they do, you would want to disclose that conversation here. So if you have that conversation, you'll say, hey, I had this conversation with so-and-so. This is the content of the conversation. This is about what happened. And you'll just disclose that to the whole body, because that does that same thing of keeping the people's work in the eye of the people. We have occasionally had someone come in and say, hey, I need the phone numbers of all of the planning commissioners so I can tell them all about my project before we come in here. And you say, no, thank you. You need to hear before the full body. So that's what ex parte is just that, again, work with the whole people.
This does happen. I mean,
Oh, it does.
Somebody tracked me down in Myers. They asked me a question. I just had to say, really can't comment on that. And
I have gotten phone calls.
For
Yeah.
Thursday. 6:30, 4 Thursday of the month. Yeah.
The thing that really jumped out at me when I read this is, you are at Myers and somebody makes a comment. You really say you should send an email and you encourage them to get in communication with the
Right.
staff here around what they are, but if all of a sudden they just keep on going on and you can't get there to stop, then that's where you have to report out what you heard. So I always encourage them to come back to staff with something written.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to run away. You can,
Encourage them to engage in the right way. Vika, one question came up actually, and it was part of the site inspection. And I apologize if I could have probably taken a look at this, but does our application have an automatic approval for site inspection by the planning commission?
I think it does. I can double check.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of small print on the application form.
Okay.
I'll double check to make sure that that's part of that.
Okay.
It doesn't specify it specifically, because that's what I thought. but-
Okay.
Okay. So you don't do the application.
We can
Yeah.
amend the form. They're always in process.
That's a real good one, because I think some of the sites that we'll be asked to look at and make decisions on, you really need to physically see it.
It makes a big difference. I was
Yeah.
at the site this week and I thought, yep, this is different than I did the vision.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, conflict of interest, and I think this is one, let's see. It's a little bit more specific. And we do address specifically in the bylaws. This is what's interesting is that this is one of the things that's also actually within the Planning Enabling Act, which is our empowering legislation. The But the conflict of interest is anytime there is a financial or personal relationship that would keep you from executing your duties. So that's if you own, lease, or rent property that's the subject of a request. If the applicant or property owner is a relative, employer, close personal friend. There are other financial ties, partner, borrower, lender, renter, investor. If you own or lease or rent property adjacent to or very close to the property under consideration, or if you reside or own property within the notification distance, those are things that could be considered a conflict of interest. When there's a financial interest, that's where it's more specific. So if you have any questions about conflict of interest, that's one that I'll typically take to our attorney to make sure that we know where we're standing with that. So if you think that you have something like that with any of the applications that come up, let me know and I'll talk to Mr. Martin about that so we can make sure we handle it appropriately.
Great. Questions on that? All right.
All right. And then training opportunities, what did I put in here? I may have written back to that in the demo. Here it goes. So there are a couple different things, and I would really love to have one or two of you. I think I budgeted for two, but one or two of you do the citizen planner training. That's through the Michigan State University Extension. Staff does that training when we first start, and then there's an additional training that staff goes through. But it really just goes through what is the work of the planning commission, and it also talks about the zoning board of appeals. But what is that work? What are the things that you're supposed to be looking at? What are the rules governing the actions that you're taking? And is a good foundational education for a lot of the work of the planning commission. It's a reasonable time commitment. I think it's 12 or 15 hours for the online. It's an online training course, and so it takes a little bit of time to go through.
Is that what you did, was the online?
Yes.
And it was
Yep.
effective?
It was, yeah. Yep. I thought it was a really good program. So if anyone is interested in that, I would love to hear that and get you signed up.
I am.
We've got 3. I'll find the budget. Okay.
Super.
And also you are all members of you will be soon, Dan. The rest of you are all members of the Michigan Association of Planning as well. There are some periodic trainings with that. There's also a conference. So if those are things that you're interested in as well, let me know. And we find as much budget for this kind of training as we can because we think it's really beneficial. So let me know if those are things you're interested in too.
Great. Very good. And I can attest to the pro housing webinars that we've been participating in, which come from the planning, Michigan planning as well. They've been really good, very interesting, specific topics for each of the webinars. The latest one we had was interesting. This actually was from yesterday, was on things that were by right or by administrative. So you basically had what they looked at were all of the different functions that happen within and specific to housing. And a lot of it I felt, although I thought it was very good, I think a lot of it was kind of targeted at larger cities that had significant, a lot of housing taking place, different types of housing, and they were trying to streamline the processes and the approvals. But they've been very good. I think the one that was on middle housing, we talked a little bit about, that was excellent. So I'm a big fan of the webinars that they run as well.
And who was that again? Who was that puts them on?
That's Michigan Planning. That was
Michigan Plan.
Yep. Yeah, you'll start to get the monthly or bi-monthly periodicals that come out that are actually quite good too. So
There's also the Michigan Township Association.
Yeah, Michigan
right?
Township Association has
Yep.
some stuff too.
Yeah.
very good. Well, we've got interest in the training opportunities. That's great. I'd like to do that as well. We'll maybe parse out a couple each year and it'd be great. Annual report.
Not too much to actually say on the annual report. This is just a summary of this past year. On the edge of the dais, there was an updated version. We didn't update who the offices were originally, and so there's just an updated version. None of the other content changes. It's just that's what that was. So, at the top, it shows a membership of the planning commission over this past year. When your terms expire, so that's just something to kind of keep in mind, and then if you're reappointment eligible, I don't know if we've talked about that here before, but that's since term limits were instituted a year or two ago. You can serve a total of 9 years. So if you took over somebody, at least at this point, if you took over somebody's position in the middle, then you wouldn't get quite to the 9 years because you'll run out of time before that appointment. But there is, those are what your terms are. And of course, then we also have your attendance for the year as well. And we know, as we've talked about this, everybody has things that come up. So we try to make as many meetings as possible, but we know that sometimes, life happens and that's something that happens. So next, it shows the meetings that we had this past year, as well as if we had a quorum, if we had special meetings, that sort of thing. And this was a blessedly calm year with a whole bunch of extra things like that. Zoning ordinance amendments are on the next page, as well as some general amendments and development applications and other reviews along those lines. So the main thing that we did over the past year was the master plan that we finished right around August. And so that was the primary work of the planning commission. And then, as you know, the short-term rentals took most of the staff time for the first 4 months of this year. So there's been a little bit of a lull at the planning commission when it comes to moving some of that other stuff forward, but we're getting there. We're going to get to the other stuff that's this also includes information on variances that were granted or requests that came before the zoning board of appeals. And what it was that they looked at, approved, did not approve. That sort of thing. And it includes some of the land use type actions that went before the township board as well. So this does need to be approved, and it will be then passed on to the township board.
I don't imagine that there's recommended changes, but I'll ask if there's any amendments, if everybody's had a chance to take a look at this, whether they feel there's anything that needed to be updated or amended.
No, I like to see this.
Yeah, really nice work on this. This is great.
That was Lorna. I'll wait for directions.
Thanks, Lorna. Great job on this. It's interesting to see what we actually collectively went through and accomplished over the year and the things that came before us. It gives, I think, for Dan coming in new especially, gives you perspective on the types of things that we see and what comes across the desk.
May I ask a rookie question?
Sure.
What does the phrase tabled entail? Because I've seen tabled, more info needed, just the word tabled.
Right.
What is tabled really mean?
Well, it's a decision not to make a decision either to approve or deny, or recommend approval or denial. Essentially what we're saying is there's information that typically it's information that we felt we didn't have all of in order to make the best informed decision. Is that anything you'd like to add? Yeah.
To build on that, that's exactly right. Instead of saying, we're going to vote to approve this, we're going to vote to deny this, we'll say, we need more information, or there's something here that's not right, or something along those lines. And then we'll table it, which means postpone it until the next meeting, until the information comes in, that sort of thing. Presumably at one point there was a table that you put that stuff on.
It's a physical table. Yeah. But a good example, we've had some site plans where there's been, ponds added or different things that require additional engineering information. And we just felt based on what we had, it wasn't sufficient. So.
Okay.
And sometimes people will come and show us something just to give comment while they're developing it. And,
Right.
And we're not ready to make a decision, but they're just giving us information as it's available.
Right.
But if it says tabled,
We
expect
right.
the applicant to come back with something.
Right.
Yeah.
Tabling it is an action. It's just not an approval or.
Okay.
Right. It's a parking lot for using horrible corporate terms that we overuse when we're in those. It's a place to put things that you're not fully aligned on yet or fully aware of in terms of how you want to work on it. So.
This does need to be approved by the planning commission.
Yes.
I move to approve the Park Township Planning Commission annual report dated June 24th through May 25th. Not 25th, 2024 through May 2025, as presented.
Support. All right, any further discussion? If not, we'll put it to a vote. All in favor? Opposed? All right. Great work. Thanks again, Laura. Nice work, both of you. I know there's a combined effort on this one.
It's a good so much last year.
What's that?
That I didn't really realize we did so much last year.
I know. All right, so that takes us to master plan implementation, I believe. Put back to the agenda here. Yep. So Mika and I talked a little bit about, well, we've talked a lot actually about some of the things that we've prioritized in the planning, the master plan. And it's hard to believe that it's almost a year. We're a couple months short of a year since this was finalized and completed. So I think the initial work we've done, we took a look at it during the winter as well and tried to put, I think, some specifics around some of the priorities. I think one of the things that now that we're a year down the line, I think there's a couple of things to consider. Number one, we have a lot of things that we had listed as nows. When we look at and everybody has the big sheet here. The oranges were ones that originally we had put together as nows. And I think if you look at those, we have a lot of things, and many of these are really reliant on staff support as well. One of the things we've talked about, I think, and Mika mentioned the STR, some of the follow-up work that was necessary on that. Not surprisingly, some of the things that we had originally identified as priorities that we wanted to get on right away. A few of those we just haven't been able to get to. There's just been the reality, I think, is just the amount of work that's involved in some of the things that have taken priority. So we thought it would be useful to take another look at this, maybe get a little bit more concise in terms of the things that we want to try to prioritize. And I think, the other thing I think, and you started to do this, Mika, was trying to put some more specific timing around some of these goals. I know you can get too tight on this and then we end up missing them and pushing them out, but maybe we try to focus on the ones that we think should be at the top of the list. And I think 25, 26 is probably realistic for those, but some of the others we may need to look out a little bit further. The other thing I was thinking about as I was looking at this is that things have come to the surface. I think that we know have become priorities. We had a lot of things in the master plan, and we have a lot of things that are really important. And some of those are going to be shorter term, more near term needs, and some of those will be a little bit further out. When I look at this, and I went down the list, we have zoning in a lot of places, right? And zoning affects right to farm. It affects housing, ADUs, it affects community development, and it's tied to our master plan. So there's a lot that links back to the zoning piece. We've talked about how we might go at that because the zoning code zoning ordinance is massive. And to try to go through and, bite off pieces of that elephant, I think small pieces are going to be about the only way we can go at that. But that's one thing to think about. I think the other piece, we look at nature and agriculture, farmland preservation, again, right to farm, meeting with blueberry growers, providing resources, programs, and sustainability standards for housing all fall into that. And then transportation, I saw that, and we'll go through each of these, but Mika, you mentioned the work done with MAC, some of the things underway with crosswalks and also signage on paths. So I think some of these things we're making good progress on. Some of these haven't been started, but they're becoming a greater priority. I think with farmland preservation, we know that's one that I think is going to be probably at the top of our list. I think it should be. Yes.
The board has already established a committee.
Yes.
They've met for the first time and will continue to meet and gather data.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be separate from our board of trustees, come back and report. We asked for 2 different types of scenarios as they attack the project.
Oh, great.
And gathering data, and so we're just going to wait and see.
Is that on master plan or on farmland preservation specifically? Okay. Okay, great.
Is there a timeline when you're expecting them to come back with?
Not
something like
yet,
that?
not yet. We're, I think they may even be looking for 2 more individuals to join their committee, so yes.
So Dave is our representative on that,
Okay.
on that committee, and I've actually been working with him. he was traveling this latest
Actually,
meeting.
missed the last meeting, so.
Yeah, so I sat in on that one as well. Yeah. Yeah, we actually had some great candidates that joined us too, and we've got a few more for the next meeting that we're trying to fill with, so.
And you were,
Yeah, thank you though. This is why we want you here. You need to be here. Because we don't always know and you don't know what we're involved in. Yep, perfect. So that's a big one. And we did have some really good folks that contributed a lot in the last meeting we had on that. So I think that's a big one. I think right to farm is something that's going to become a bigger deal as well as growers try to figure out how to make their primary crops and their land more successful in terms of survivable and how they can build that over time. So that's something we need to take a look at. So I just wanted to throw in a couple of things that I think a lot of these do fit into specific buckets. That's expected since we have categories and subcategories against these goals. But I think it's a good starting point to kind of think. I think we've looked at agriculture, we've looked at the housing piece, farmland preservation. So and Mika, I don't know if you want to walk through, maybe take us through some of the updates that you've got listed on some of the things, the progress that we do have at this point.
Sure. So the active transportation piece, we were not doing anything on that until the MAC had finished their active transportation plan, and that's largely complete now. I don't remember if that was made official or still in the comment phase, but it's very close to being done. There's also been a lot of conversation about crosswalks. I'm not part of that conversation. The township manager has been managing that part of the conversation, but as far as crosswalks specifically, the bike path, we have some signage that will be out as soon as I can get it quoted and ordered. A few weeks behind on that one, but that is for the rules that you passed. So kind of the courtesy rules. We worked with Boileau Communications, and I don't think did I send that out to you guys? I know the board has seen it, but I don't
I
think
think you did.
you might have seen that.
Yeah.
So Tart Trails has some great signs up near Traverse City that are they're very lighthearted and they're like,
Yep.
hey, here are the rules, but not in a serious way. So we worked with Boileau to come up with some for Park Township, and so those should be out hopefully soon, as soon as we can get them out there. So I was working with maintenance this week even to come to an agreement on what kinds of signs those would be. So that's been in progress. Let's see. We have not done anything, as you know, on the increase, changing the zoning code for our on-farm activities and value-added products. So that's the agritourism piece that we talked about. Don't want to get with the Farmland Preservation Committee, want to make sure that we're on the same page and moving forward, and that's still in the process of being formed. So I do think that's something that we want to prioritize as that group gets going. It's something we do get occasional questions about. I had one just this past week about people who want to go do fun stuff, and that Park Township's a good place to be doing some of that, but we don't have a way to open that door yet. And some of our existing farms that are working kind of under the Right to Farm Act. The Right to Farm Act allows zoning exemptions, but only up to a certain point. And we just don't want to get into a situation where they want to expand in a way that we might want them to expand, but it goes further than the Right to Farm Act goes, and then we get into kind of a sticky situation where we're trying to either shut down something we'd like to see or negotiate something that we really don't have the authority to negotiate. So getting a little bit of that down to say this is what we really want to see, I think would just be helpful guidance. But we want to get that farmland preservation committee going first.
And that's a Michigan right to farm. That's not anything that's at the county level or at the.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the Right to Farm Act is state of Michigan, and it's a pretty vague piece of legislation. It does not get into specifics. And it originated in the 80s, I think, when people were doing a lot of complaining. Suburbs started to expand into farmland, and people were winning complaints against farmers for doing what they had always done, spreading manure and doing all that kind of farming stuff. And now, they just happen to live right next door to that, and all of a sudden it's a problem. So it was to keep that from becoming an issue. But the Right to Farm Act vacates local zoning authority in a lot of things. It's not entire, so they have something as well called the GAMPs, the Generally Accepted Agricultural Management Practices. They have maybe 8 sets of those. And they go from farm markets to site selection. They have one for cranberry production, which is kind of funny how specific that is, but they have a handful of those. Those get a little more specific as far as this is what's allowed and this is what's excluded, this is what's protected within the right department. So, yeah, that is a state level legislation.
Okay.
Oh, let's see, what's next? Green Communities Challenge. We have not done anything with that. Oh, I think I just jumped ahead. Okay, right to Farm Act, floodplain ordinance. This is one I think I have the budget for this year and would like to have somebody just take a look at our floodplain standards. I've done some trainings and I've looked at them, but I'm not well enough versed in them to read through it and say, that's not where it needs to be. So I'd like to have somebody look at those and just make sure that they're up to date so that we're in compliance with what we need to be. Sustainability standards, we haven't worked on that at all to my knowledge. Purchase of development rights program, that again is part of that farmland preservation committee. And like I said, we haven't done anything on the Green Communities Challenge. That might be something that we could get started on the staff level relatively soon. I think the concept behind that was to start gathering some information and then decide what metrics we wanted to address more specifically. So
There's a lot there.
there's a lot here.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit with conversation with grower, local blueberry industry. We've talked about how that farmland preservation committee is getting together. So nothing really new to report there. Revising zoning code to align with recommendations of the master plan. Tom was just mentioning how much needs to be updated in the zoning code. There's a lot. And so we'll just, a year or so ago, I think I brought you a tentative work plan, and that's something I usually have operating in the background. That's kind of here's what we're working on from the master plan towards those, and here's some of the cleanup. So we'll be working through some of that. We might have some of that at the next meeting for cleanup. So
Great.
Mika, can I ask a question?
Yes.
How does what the item you just spoke about tie in with halfway down page 2, the evaluate zoning code for barriers to increasing housing supply? I know that's a lot more specific, but
yes,
if you complete this task and then jump to this one, now you're rewriting it again.
yeah. The housing one is, I would call that a specific subset. So I think that we included, that's the one on the first page, revised zoning code to align with master plan. It's tagged ongoing, and I think we left that intentionally vague because we know that there's a bunch of stuff in the zoning code that needs to be updated. So it's not meant to exclude that.
Okay.
Continue to provide access to on-demand transit services. There's no new action currently required on that. Max Transit offers demand response service in Park Township. That's something that started just a few years ago. And so nothing will change there. Max itself is going to be rolling out new routes in August. They just finished a really large study and realignment to try to make the routes more efficient for people and to operate more quickly so they get where they're trying to go. Max also has a new executive director who started just a couple months ago. So Park Township Community Park. Park development is ongoing. You see things out there occasionally. There's discussion now, I think, of restrooms and parking lots. I think that those are the next things on the list, the last that I heard. But again, I think the board is working on that along with the manager. So I'm not involved in that.
We reviewed one proposal last meeting and asked that it be massaged and brought more within our budget. It was quite large.
That was around the additional pickleball courts.
This was the additional parking and $400,000 event.
Oh. Okay.
Oh,
We asked that
Some nice
we
math.
looked at it again.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, it looks like I cut off the top of this top one on transportation. This was on transportation safety and prioritizing speed reductions. Now, the tricky thing with the transportation pieces is that we don't own the roads and we're really at the mercy of the road commission. But we do try to work with them, partner with them as we can. And so I know that the manager was working quite a bit on the road diet on Ottawa Beach Road. That has been, from what we've seen, effective in slowing speeds there. And then just today, the speed signs went live. Our deputy got those turned on, and so we'll be playing with those as far as what sign, what like when it turns from yellow to red and when it starts blinking and all of that. But those responsive signs are in. So there's work being done.
I drove
Trying
all
to-
the way to the beach and back just to see them.
Yeah, we were asking if he wanted us to go fast down the road to see if the signs are working.
So a question I have on the road commission stuff, are these the things under project and action? I'm assuming that those are just things that we are making aware to them as they do their evaluation, so it's kind of their checklist of things that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's their roads, and so, and they operate within general engineering constraints and conventions. And also within some state legislation, so speed limits. Michigan is unique in that, in the way that they set speed limits, and it's not great, it's not especially safe, and it's been really difficult to change that legislation, so. Yeah, we all have kind of constraints that we're working within. When it comes to something like increasing safety, then those are just conversations. What are we gonna target? You know, we're a partner agency with them. There are a lot of other municipalities, obviously, in Ottawa County, and they kind of try to be consistent across all of them, but that just ends up being a long series of conversations. It's not really something that you can say, you have to do this. But you can try to persuade. Oh, let's see what else. Public EV charging infrastructure, I don't have any update on that. And I would say most of these next ones, I don't have any update on. These were not on the due right away list.
Right.
The zoning code barriers to housing supply, we have talked about that a little bit. And I've started looking through the ordinance at some of those items as well, but that pretty early stages. And obviously we had talked about the ADUs at the last meeting.
Can I comment?
Yes.
So this is March fiscal year 25-26. Are we planning to keep that on there as just discussion or keep that on there as proposing? Some.
There's a lot of legwork in this, so we may end up doing some sort of action items, especially specifically with the ADUs before the next fiscal year. But a lot of what the intent is for this year is to do some information gathering on housing and to lay some of that groundwork so we can be, so we can do it in kind of an organized fashion.
All right, I know that I voiced this last meeting and I won't beat the horse, but I think this needs to be pushed off a little bit further and we get a hold of short-term rentals first. Because those have not even been shut down yet.
Yeah.
And here we are presenting, hey, put a second house in your backyard and have somebody live in it, so.
Yeah,
It
so
gives me heartburn.
you know, I understand that, and I think that that's something that's important to reckon with, that we do have this short-term rentals issue, and it's gonna take a while. It's not gonna be a quick thing to resolve, as you know. So you know, when it comes to things like the separate houses, this might be one that you might decide this is not appropriate for Park Township right now at all,
Right.
in any way. But you might decide, well, but an interior suite, that might be okay. So
Yep, I
yeah.
do. Thank you.
Yep. I'm in agreement. I think the legwork is probably going to take care of the timeline. There's a lot of detail in this before we even start thinking about how we need to plan and message this to the community. A lot of work.
You know, the thing that I saw as I was going through here, and I really liked the way you started summarizing some things over here. There are so many things that are interconnected here.
Yeah.
And to me, what would be really helpful is to go name something, and there may be a phase 1 and a phase 2 and a phase 3, and you have to do them in that sequence.
Yeah.
Because one will inform the other, and you don't have people crossing over. So there's just a lot of items on here, and I think bubbling some of that stuff up to some key initiatives and phasing them would be
I agree.
easier to understand.
I think it's a good idea. Okay, and I think that I will stop there because I don't think there are any updates on anything beyond that. But would like to hear thoughts and feedback. I'll let you lead.
Yeah, like, I do think, I think the bike path extension, we've had the ribbon cutting on Cooper Van Leeuwen on
Oh, yeah.
the trail, so. I think that's one where we've got, progress. That was on recreation and the bottom of the second page. Let's see. Yeah, we've got another zoning code on the top of the third page and this, yeah, actually two there. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I think the nears are probably maybe a little bit further out. Yeah, I'll open it up. I think I made some initial comments on some things that I think are just by nature of the things that are important, that have become important around agriculture, around we've discussed the housing. I think that's a starting point. I do think just from the initial, because I've sat in on a couple of the farmland preservation meetings, I do think that right to farm, I haven't dug into the GAMPS piece, but I think just understanding that whole thing as part of farmland preservation is going to be important. I think there's another important piece of that, which, and I'll just throw this out. And Dave, we talked about this. I know the first meeting we had is that what does farmland preservation mean to the residents of Park Township? We heard from I think all of the forums and all the input we got when we were working on the master plan development, that's really important. Having the agriculture, having the blueberry growing, having all the things that we recognize as part of the complexion of Park Township is really important. At the same time, the key to being able to support that and maintain that is really going to be the purchase of development rights program. That takes help from both the farmers, a willingness to support that, but also resources, financial resources. There is an element that goes into that, and I think one of the things that's going to have to be discussed is where do those come from. We have a good model from Ottawa County, but it's a very small program in terms of what they've been able to do, and a lot of that is resource constraints. So I think one of the things that's going to have to be determined is how does that get supported long term, right? And I think we've talked about that. So I think that's a pretty big piece of the agriculture end of it. I do think restarting the conversation with the growers is going to be really important. We have a couple that have been part of the preservation, farmland preservation discussions, which I think has been great. And they've provided some really good insight. And I'll share some of those things with you, Dave, because from the last meeting as well. I think that also feeds into agritourism. So I think there's a lot within that. And again, it touches on zoning. So that to me is a big bucket. And I think that's going to take, they are interconnected. It's kind of that, I'm thinking the mind map where you've got things connected, exactly the way you were describing it, I think. So that's a big one for me. And I think it gets us to a lot of things that are important within this. But it is going to take digging into, again, zoning and a number of other areas. But I'll stop there and kind of open it up because I'll just stop there.
What was interesting, so I was listening to the topic Chris Quagnon's presented at Aspen. It was the West Michigan housing shortage. So he had two series and it was fascinating. The first one is kind of the history of how we got here. And then the second half is what are some of the things that we can do to start to improve that. So and they started talking about some of the little things that we're talking about. The zoning is probably one of the first areas that you look at And we started talking about, what is it, the attached dwelling, what was that?
Yeah, attached, internal, attached or
Yeah,
detached.
yeah,
They're the three.
so that was really a big thing, and they said those are some easy steps to kind of get started with, but it's almost like. To me, the zoning is such an important issue to start to address some of these other issues that we have. And if we're gonna be redoing this master plan or updating the master plan in 5 years, what are the things that we need to know and have ready to be better informed or to be more informed as we do that master plan? So it's kind of like sequencing these things, so we have all the information we need to update that. That's just kind of where my head goes. I'm the strategic planner and stuff, so.
Good part of the team.
Yes, very good.
And shared number one topic that I wanted to.
Well, I want to, if I can, Mr. Chair, talk
Please.
about agriculture again, because this has been a hot topic in my basket for a number of years now. Farmland preservation and doing it with buying development rights, as you say, is a very expensive process. My idea, this one person, is that the best way to have farmland preservation is to preserve the farm economically. There is no home for farm economic development in the region. Some people would say MSU extension, but they'll tell you to go big or go home. It's not Lakeshore Advantage, that's industrial. It's not the Chamber of Commerce, that's retail and distribution. So I'm very excited about this group, but I worry that they'll spend all their time trying to raise money to pay farmers for basically for their land and let them continue to farm whether they make money or not, while the whole rest of the farmers are going belly up. And so if we can make this group think about both sides of that coin, farm land preservation and farm economy preservation, I think that would be a big bucket to grab onto first and shove the other ones back a little.
So can I comment?
Please.
We as Park Township we aren't creating our own, actually Ottawa County has a preservation group.
Right.
And so we would be benchmarking and working with them as we develop something for Park Township.
But is that the limit of the mission of this group that's being put together?
Were they given a mission?
I think, and yeah,
I think it's still under.
I think it's still, yeah,
I think the
it's
scope is.
it's
still-
being scoped. We're still putting the committee together. But I think Dan, what you've just described is a big part of it, is the economics. I think, we've talked about agritourism.
Yeah.
We've talked about what right to farm allows. I think we want farmers, first of all, we want them to continue to farm. We know in some cases there aren't succession plans. So that's why some of these programs where farmland can be leased or purchased through programs like this is a positive. But ideally, I mean, we would love to find ways to help them be more successful in the economy of what they're doing in their farms. And I think that's a big part of what we're trying to help. And that's why we're bringing people in with different backgrounds and different experiences. One of the members that we have is CEO of Zealand Farm Services. So he's coming in, he has very broad net in terms of, he's been very involved in the farming community for a very long time. He has that experience. We have blueberry growers and other farmers that have come in and have brought some really good insights into what they've provided. I don't think, I think development rights is part of it, but I also think it will be difficult to be able to find ways to raise the kind of resources that would be needed to supplement what the farmer would sell their land for. Because the idea behind that plan is the difference between what a developer would pay for the property and what it's worth in farming, and how do you maintain that to continue to be agricultural property long term. So yeah, that's a challenging scenario. But we're trying to, I think the goal is to look at all angles and try to see what the best options are, the best plan can be. All considerations.
From an economic standpoint, zoning board of appeals, for instance, we looked at signage for a facility on James Street, Blueberry Farmer, to help him diversify in terms of outreach to the township and his farm market, and allow him to advertise some of the other offerings that he's making available to the public. There's vertical integration opportunities for these farmers that they've never had before. They're just used to growing it and selling it. Well, cold storage, the ability to, on a collaborative basis, put some kind of a coalition together to reduce costs. I mean, there are economic opportunities that we have to explore that could really assist in preserving the farmlands that are within the township.
A great point. I think we're open at this point. We're just trying to look at, I think the idea is to look at different options and look at the challenges that are out there and trying to see what we can do to help support the solutions. Other thoughts on blueberries or anything else we have on that in terms of implementation?
Whole bunch of hurry up and wait.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot here. The zoning piece, I'll just touch on. We've talked a lot about that. It's a monstrous document. It is in need of updating across a couple of different vectors that are, as we've talked about, that are affecting a lot of things that are in the master plan. It feels like about the only way to make progress on that is to look at the specific things that we want to do that are going to be impacted by what's in there today and try to chip away at those. I mean, the only other option is to try to do a total overhaul, and I think that's going to be
It's on the list.
put it this way.
I'm quite ready. I'd like to breathe for a month or two.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, yeah. So maybe it's a case of just looking at some of these, agreeing that we want to try to target a few of these specific initiatives and then look at how those are impacted or maybe where the barriers might be
Yeah.
within the zoning code.
Kind of tying it back to Len's comment from earlier, saying we should look at maybe bucketing these issues and prioritizing them more as they're related and phasing them. Because I think that will help us get through them. We'll still have, our high level buckets, but especially when it comes to looking at the zoning, having it in more of a phased approach and breakdown, I think would be helpful for us to take those related but smaller bite-sized pieces of the updates that we're looking to do.
Well, that attacks a lot of these. Do we want to take a look and try to, with the ones that we have put in here as that are priorities, do we want to try to rank these a little bit based on, because I think the other thing we need is, Mika, from your perspective, is the workload that each of these are going to, what's the staff support going to look like and what's realistic to try to look at if we look at balance of year as we get into 26 and so forth.
I think maybe what would be helpful if you hear from the planning commission, where are the top ones, and then you and I work together and talk more specifics on workload, because you're right, some of these are multi-phase and some of them are hire a consultant and be done with it, so.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay.
I mean, I'll dive in if you want.
Sure.
Speaking of, perhaps one that is hire a consultant and be able to move forward. So we still had it as, one of our now priorities on the floodplain ordinance update. And I think that it's still kind of on its own and falls into that bucket. So I think we should probably still keep it there so we can just get it taken care of, get it updated. And I don't think that will have a huge, you tell me, a huge impact on the rest of our priorities, but allow us to just leave it at the top to get it done.
Make sure nothing's changed since two
Yep.
thousand, whatever, yeah.
Personally, given the infancy of the Farmland Preservation Committee, while I still think it's near the top of our list, if we're gonna reorganize, I would move it down in order to give time for the committee to continue, defining the mission, getting the rest of the members, if you're seeking, additional, people to join, so that there's an opportunity to get feedback before we start doing any of that work. I definitely still think it's important, but we really are gonna want the feedback from that committee before we start working on making changes there.
I agree. And I think, the question, what's your charter? What's the objective? What are our goals? What's the mission of the Farmland Preservation Committee? I think if you talk to different people, you're going to get slightly different perspectives on it, right? So I think that's really important. And I agree. I think we'll need a little bit of time to kind of sort through that.
I'm just building upon what Stephanie said. And so maybe Mika's kind of taking a look at these and say, when we do this first piece of research or whatever, when we know that, we might have another team that needs to go spin off and look at something, but they really need that information so that they're informed. So maybe there's a logical sequence of how you build that. And you probably have a better idea than we do on what that sequence looks like, but that might be helpful.
One thing that might be helpful too, so when it comes to housing, we're talking about a few different things. We're talking about specifics like ADUs, we mentioned cottage courts, and some different forms that are currently allowed in the ordinance. We also have what our current ordinance says for developments. And so there was the development on the south side that you approved last year, the townhouses. We have a couple more developments coming in. Tom and I, along with Dave, had talked about the tree preservation ordinance a couple of different times, and some things that might need to change there when it came to developments as well. So also just thinking through what you want to see in the development so that we can align that a little bit more closely if we're going to kind of open the hood and go through things. So I think with the PUD ordinance, we might be looking at making some changes there for encouraging more different types of housing or some things like that as well. But something to be thinking about what you want those developments to look like when they come through, especially as we're talking about infill housing, which is going to be closer in, closer to neighbors. It's going to be a little bit different than, the development that doesn't have any next door neighbors to start with. I think there are two that may be on your agenda next month. It might be the month following, depending on how some of the conversations go, but they're coming up. And then I've gotten inquiries on at least two others, and these are all what I would call infill development. So they're all south of James, and they're all right up against other neighborhoods. So just thinking through what that should look like.
Yeah, I know in the past year, so we go to the tree preservation thing, tree hugger. So I think it was the development on the south side. What was really great, I kept thinking we should do this on all of them, where they actually had to go do an inventory of the condition of the trees and the health and the maturity and all. And that was, I thought, really, really good. And what if we did that for all requirements? I mean, we really need a tree analysis. And to me, that alone would just help us. So many times it's hard to assess what what the trees look like, what type of conditions. They say, oh, that's just the developer. They say that's just scruff, but is it really scruff? And I don't, to me, I don't know that I really just trust somebody saying that. I really want a thorough analysis, and it helps us to make a really good decision and make recommendations.
They could be looking at it in the winter also, so
Right,
the
right.
assessment is not even near correct.
That's where individual site visit is helpful too.
Yeah.
Because I walked that site before they tore apart, clear cut it. And, yeah, there was a lot of nice trees there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the definitions that have been looking at recently and been kind of thinking about, so. We allow, we say no clear cutting, you can't remove more than is needed to build the development, but if you're talking about an R5 development. That's pretty much all the area, so.
Right.
Defining the buffers a little bit more clearly and saying this is. This is exactly what we're looking for in a buffer. I ran across some old developments from, I don't know, I think it was late 90s, early 2000s, where this was prior to the tree preservation ordinance, but they required a buffer. And it was a very strict buffer. This is to be surveyed, this is to be on the deeds, there to be irons pounded in along the edges of that. And I thought, oh boy, the developers are complaining about over at Q4 now.
Yeah.
You know, but that does add extra cost too, and so that's kind of that flip side. As we're thinking about that is what the extra cost is that adds.
Yeah, I don't think we're experts. I know we do have a tree hugger among us, but who's also got a certification, so, well, maybe.
That'll help with some discussions.
That'll help. It will help a lot in discussions. I think, because we do have different situations where we have challenges around the number of trees or the types of trees or how many trees are needed. And yeah, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think strategically too, relative to the health of trees, right? And
Yep.
and understanding, the impact depending on, the property itself, right? There's certain ecosystems, especially we are looking at, infill in certain neighborhoods like, just to our south here. You have those beech trees and those oak trees and they're symbiotic. And if you remove some, you're inadvertently impacting the others, right? And that definitely gets more tricky. But it certainly has an impact, right? Because we could be making that decision and they're saving them, but only temporarily because we're going to impact the health of what's going to get left behind potentially.
And remember, every tree has below ground the same dimensions as has above ground. And so if you get too tight to it, you'll kill it. So you might as well cut it.
Yeah.
So there's an art to it.
Yeah, you tear up the root system and, yep,
So yes, I mean, I would agree that one.
tightening up the specifics.
Yeah, or then looking at that ordinance and making that one of our priority updates, I think it definitely would be impactful. I know obviously it came up a lot last year. If we're gonna have more, it sounds like we're not gonna have it updated before we get additional ones here, but there's always gonna be more. So we should definitely look at that one.
And that's a relatively new one, so,
Yeah.
I think that was maybe 2020 that was passed, so. Be pretty normal to roll something out and say, okay, now we've learned some things from this, so let's just tighten up.
Well, I think it'd be a plus for the developers too, because they come in with a lot of questions and we try to provide the best guidance we can, but it does tend to be, I'll never say arbitrary, but it does tend to be a little bit more subjective and situational than it should be.
Yeah, and it is
Yeah.
helpful to be able to communicate, this buffer needs to be 30 feet, it needs to be 50 feet, it needs to be 20 feet. And then, maybe to give the planning commission the discretion to increase or decrease, but to have a starting point, I think that would be something that's helpful because it's just very clear. They do like when things are clear.
Yeah.
I remember a developer asking a question, well, in that buffer, you want to have deciduous and non-deciduous, and they said, well, what would you like? We're going,
Yeah.
well, very types of
The good
ones.
ones.
Hemlock's struggling right now, what are the types of trees that we think are good options for this area? And we're not saying you have to use this one, but something that we struggled on.
Right.
And then they struggled,
Yeah.
so that might be helpful.
Well, sometimes there are a lot of trees that probably aren't going to survive, but to have a recommendation on what is native, what grows well, what should be a good fit for the, in this area, I think would be a real plus for them. It'd help them.
I'll admit too, I know we just approved up on James, but then we had those storms come through and I saw quite a bit of damage in that little tree line that was part of the buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw like when it came through fresh, there were a couple big branches and I certainly didn't go traipsing through now that it's all planted.
There's a lot of
Um,
that stuff.
there was, but
Oh, the northwest.
yeah, it still had big green,
Yeah, that
like
was-
wilted
Yeah.
branches when that storm came through and I was like,
Yep.
kind of poor timing, in hindsight, right? Because we were counting on those still being there as part of said buffer.
Right.
But it would, if we had that established as needing to be a certain size to begin with, then we could maybe take that into consideration too, like give ourselves a little more wiggle room because we don't know, although we may, based on more recent data, be able to say that it's becoming increasingly more probable that the severity of storms it is going to continue to increase. And that is unfortunately going to have an impact on our intent. And we probably do need to think about that. And it's going to be important for the developers too, right? Because they're also going to need space if we're requiring these trees and the future homeowners also aren't going to want those trees in their homes. So it's all about finding that right balance too, of having the tree preservation, being strategic and trying to find the best balance while being as clear and concise and considering all of those different variables. And I think it's going to be really tricky because there's a lot more things that feel outside of our control, especially when you start talking about, best intentions on the tree ordinance, but.
Well, I think a lot of those 100-year storms are coming a whole lot more frequently too. And I know it's creating some groundwater conversations and things that are coming up as well. So it's, I think those are things that need to be considered as well.
And that is something, on the other side of the tree preservation is to be thinking about, okay, so then what about when all these trees that we've preserved now have oak wilts? What about when these trees, are leaning towards somebody's house? What
Right.
about that sort of thing? And to kind of build in the fact that these are living organisms. And what do you address? How do you address that when that plan B comes up?
Yep.
So I've got a question, probably it's for Reba. The board has not approved that development yet.
I was in a meeting on that today, incidentally.
I saw the notes. Yeah.
North side with the
Oh,
trees
yeah,
down that
gotcha.
Stephanie just talked about.
Mhm.
Is that something that can be asked at this point? Because I know we're just debating ponds and water levels and
Yeah.
dewatering and making sure we're talking timing correct.
Yeah, let me back up just because I don't know if the whole planning commission knows. You approved the development on the northwest side
Northwest,
corner
yeah.
of James back in March.
Trailview.
It went to the board in April, but a public hearing wasn't held. It was noticed, but it was just, how agenda items go sometimes. And so the public hearing wasn't held. So according to our esteemed attorney, that did not count. It was a do-over, never happened. In the time between that approval, that faux approval in April and the May meeting, a number of the residents of the Pine Island development, which is on the southwest corner of James, came and said, hey, our pond level is way down since that Blue Haven pond, which is, remember, the southeast side of 160th and James. Since that was built, since the dewatering was done for those utilities. And so our engineers have been out there shooting water levels and getting those for the past, I think, 6 weeks or so, and looking at dewatering. And of course, now that we're talking about water, a lot of this is stuff that would typically have happened more in the construction phase, and it's going more into the approval phase. But they've been talking about, making sure that the draw rate of that water during the dewatering doesn't affect the plume and from Riley Trails landfill and all of that. So all of those things are kind of in the process of coming to an agreement, so that it's not overly onerous to the developer, and it's ensuring that we protect the health and welfare of the residents of Park Township, which is what we're charged with. So, could you add that now? You could. We've added 3 or 4 months at this point to their timing.
Right.
So I'm a little bit hesitant to add extra things. I don't have a problem trying to make sure that developers are trying to, are doing a good job. But I want to be fair to them too, and it was already a delay, so.
Correct, and so the engineers on staff following the water and the pond issues is most appropriate, and it is most appropriate to delay what we've done. I'm just thinking there's the question, hey, we had a storm come through and the buffer's now X% less than what it was. Are you guys planning on planting anything further, or what are you foreseeing? I don't think it's objectionable to ask the question. I don't know if we can demand a fix something it was.
No, well, I mean, you can, until it's approved, you can, but they are kind of doing the math on this, what we're asking them to do with. The monitoring, there's gonna be some additional monitoring wells and testing. They have a contract that's going to be going out there to ensure it's all the right thing. It's just that we wanna, I don't know, maybe not be springing things on them
Right.
at the last minute. So that's what I would be a little bit concerned about. But
Okay.
if it's a very high priority, then yeah, until it's approved, then that's something that is something that can be added.
I haven't driven down there. I don't know what the damage was to the area.
I mean, I saw the down branches after the storm came through.
Quick look at it and see if that's all deadwood that came down or what.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go walk that tomorrow. So I'll do that. But I shouldn't copy everybody on.
No,
I volunteer to go too, but we can't go together, so.
I'm gonna be there.
Anyway. No, I think, but this also speaks to the benefit of doing a tree assessment ahead of time, right? If we didn't know what was in there, we could know what was damaged.
Right.
So.
And yeah, just having more particular guidelines about exactly, how dense it needs to be, how big, that sort of thing.
I think we put a requirement under without really doing any kind of analysis.
Yeah, or, I don't know if it's appropriate, if something we can include, right, but have some sort of language to say, like, based on if we're requiring a survey, is, or equivalent, right? So if between the time we recommend approval and it gets approved, or, through the course of development, there is another storm, right? If we get straight line winds and it takes it all down, then what? I think if it's appropriate, that's something we should include as well.
I think a replacement plan of some kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
Obviously, we can get into the details when we pull it up, but I think it's definitely something that we have a lot of opportunity to discuss and think about strategically.
Something I would add to the tree preservation. So when they say they're gonna do something, are we checking to make sure that they really did that? So is there a way of following up and monitoring that?
I have a question as well.
Yeah, so I've been on the south side site just in the past week. And I haven't gone through to go tree by tree. I was looking at some of the drainage stuff and the retention ponds, and our engineer's been out there as well, just to try to see, is this built different? Is this how it's supposed to look? So I haven't gone tree by tree yet, but they're still doing a lot of landscaping. It's not finished yet. But yeah, I do plan to go out there and make sure that what was promised and what was passed
Are
does
you
actually.
saying 3 by 3 the ones that they were taking out or the ones that they were put back?
I was just gonna look at the ones that were still there, because I think the other one's gonna be harder to find.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Everything, well, we didn't make them leave, they took
Oh,
out.
they did.
They cleared it.
they did, and
Yeah,
I
before they started any construction, I was really disappointed when I saw that lot. I mean, they just.
when I went out there, yeah, the definition of clear cutting was one that I was looking at, and then when I went out there too, I had a similar thought of, that's not what I had envisioned that looking like when we were looking at the paper. So to make sure that it actually looks like it was supposed to look on the paper, and then take that as lessons learned, and how do we walk away from that, and then for the next one, get something that we like.
The example that I'm thinking of is the development on James. It would be the southeast corner that development is going in right now. We were very concerned about that berm because they had a lot of trees along there, and that was such a nice area along the bike path. And my impression was that there are a lot of really good trees in there, but we will save what we can. There's nothing. It's totally gone. And when we talked to them about that, about what they're gonna plant up there, it wasn't very definitive, and it's just like, in my head, I'm going, are they really gonna do what what they said they were gonna do? And that's kind of my question. How are we following up to make sure that they're actually doing it?
Yeah, and so we do follow up afterwards. So once it goes through the planning commission, once it goes through the board, kind of the next step is there's a lot of engineer type stuff. There's a pre-construction meeting where all the utilities as well as the township engineers and I'm there are all as far as this is how we're going to build that. And then there are kind of gateways that go all along the process. A lot of it's utilities based and you have to get this in and then it has to be tested and then it has to be accepted into the system and that sort of thing. And then our looks are part of that. So we're looking at, does this look how it's supposed to look? With the landscaping stuff that tends to come a little bit later. I will take another look at that Blue Haven approval and see what was actually approved. And that's the other thing that we need to be mindful of. And that I need your eyes on as well, is that we talk about a lot of things. What's actually in the approval, that is what's binding. And so we need to make sure that that all is reflected in that actual approval too.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
But I will check.
Great. It's a good start. I guess I would like us to start to tackle some of the key elements of the zoning ordinance that are affecting some of these things that we're identifying as priorities. I think they're the right ones, but I also think that we have enough challenges in this zoning ordinance that we should start to hit the ones that tie directly back to these. So I would think that would tie back to the farming. I'm not sure about the agritourism piece. It would probably tie back to that as well.
Are there things that you would like to know more about that come to mind? Like we had talked about the GAMPS and the Right to Farm Act. That was one that I thought of, but are there other specifics that you'd like some additional education on?
If there's any information about what Dennis talked about, vertical integration, because that's a good one. Processors, cooperative processing to turn carrots into school kids size carrots. There's nobody any place around here that does that.
Yeah.
And
Gotta think outside the box.
Yeah.
You just can't do it the way you've done it in the last 100 years.
And it sounds like from some of what we've heard in the farmland preservation meetings that some of the larger growers are starting to do that. And they have the resources and I think are thinking out of the box in terms of how they take their products that they're producing, that they're growing and expand that into the further along, vertically integrating that into the marketplace.
there's a lady in Muskegon named Marty Gersiner who is the director or executive director of the West Michigan Food Processing Association, which really doesn't have much to do with what she does, but it's a nonprofit trying to address these vertical integration issues.
Okay.
This is a 10, 15-year-old story in Traverse City. They've done a marvelous job of creating a regional food system. And Marty is trying to bring it south along the lakeshore. So she might be somebody that you should talk to
Yeah, that sounds.
and link in with that group.
Yeah, I know what they've done. Traverse City is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
The two things that I see on here that were now that are very connected would be the sustainability standards. Because let's just say in 2 years, we decide there's going to be some sort of community center, maybe not what was proposed. we really need to have those established and they need to be designing to those. And then, I think maybe you remember when they were redoing the general store, the architects came in and I asked a question, what are you doing around sustainability standards? And they just it was just real loose. And I think we need to have a point of view on that, this as new buildings come in, but we need to walk the talk with our own buildings first.
Mhm.
So to me, the sustainability standards is really important, and it really, I think it's a subset of the green communities piece. I mean, that they're connected.
Mhm.
So, and then one way of measuring, is, your buildings and so, anyways. To me, that's gonna be something important because this is gonna come up again for us to kind of think about how we wanna do this.
Yeah.
We don't have many new buildings, but it will come back.
I think based on some of the infill development proposals we're gonna see, having that in place would be really helpful.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's actually a significant part of the green communities piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Are there, I mean, I know you got very deep into this when you were working on the community center. Are there some standards? I would think there's some out there that we could start with. That,
Yeah.
I mean, I know, LEED and different things as far as materials and air quality within different properties and things like that. Could you recommend a starting point for us on that?
Yeah, so when we put the proposal out so yes, LEED standards, and you have to decide if you want to go silver, gold, platinum, so there's different levels.
Right.
And you don't want to start with the toughest one, but you don't want to go with the lowest, so there's usually kind of a gold standard. And so literally, what we were doing in our proposal, we said, we want you to design this building. You don't need to go through certification because that's really costly and a lot of submittals. And a lot of people don't want to do that, but if they design to those standards, as they're designing, there are 7 categories. And they have to tell you all of the things that they're doing to meet those standards. So literally, it's just adopting maybe, LEED Gold as what we think would be really good for us. And just ask organizations to, they have to design to it and they have to share that information, with the community, yeah. So I don't think we have to create anything, we just need to adopt it. Yeah.
That's a major opportunity for us.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
I agree.
In
Yeah.
fairness, I'd love to keep going, but I think between sustainability
I think
and
we've got
parking.
it.
If you keep going, we're gonna end up with more than we can,
We'll end up with this.
yeah.
Which one will not?
But I think Mika, does this help you in terms of what you're looking for? I know we've sort of narrowed it down.
These include things.
Yeah, well, and I think it is helpful, you just hear the conversation and, as we look at what's next and look at phasing things, I think that doing that in a little more defined way, that's gonna be really helpful. So, yeah, thank you for the conversation.
Great. Super. Let's see. I think we have, business and announcements. Do we have zoning report, Dennis? Anything happening in the ZBA these days?
It was a good meeting. I'm trying to think, I'm getting confused sometimes.
I don't remember it.
I think you recapped it in your report, didn't you? Isn't it the last meeting in the report? Huh?
It might be, it probably is.
Yeah, we had a really good discussion on front and side yard setbacks on corner lots. And we had a petitioner who really was stretching the envelope on us because it had view shed considerations and it had not only view shed, but it opened up a can of worms that we would have a very difficult time controlling in terms of enforcement. So we tried to give him as much latitude to revise his request, and finally we just had to deny the application. And I'm proud of the zoning board for doing that, because it's gonna make enforcement a lot easier going forward.
Yeah, it's hard to say no, but they did a good job. I don't, nobody was very happy then, I mean, because it doesn't feel good to say no, but there were a couple that were denied and those were the right choices. That was good too, so.
And as much as I love Bill Sickle, he's a good friend. He's gotta lose every once in a while.
We are being recorded. Thanks, Dennis. Sure. Board, I know you've talked about a couple of things, but yeah.
Yeah, so we meet next week and I don't think.
Okay. And I think we've talked about farmland preservation. Yeah, I'll just speak to it. We had some candidates that came in. Had some great discussions. I think we've got a couple of folks from that group that came in, and I think I think Howard had the names of 3 or 4 other folks he was going to reach out to upcoming for the July meeting. So we'll have some folks to talk to there as well. So we're really happy with the folks that came out, and I think we're going to have a good cross section of expertise and input. So very good.
Tom, do you know when that July meeting is?
I think we're going to. I'll pull it up and shoot it to you.
Yes.
I think they're going to the same. It's this third Tuesday, something like that. But I'll bring it up and send it to you. Cool. Any other business or announcements that we have? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Support. All in favor? Thanks.
On that one.